I thank you, Patrick, for inviting me. Patrick asked me to come, and it is the first time I've been back to City Hall since leaving as mayor, either in any public way at all. I'm here because, contrary to what you might think, that I would take great pride in the ballparks or the convention center, which I do, the most important thing to me in Pittsburgh, and the thing I most love, are the riverfronts. I grew up in this city, not far from the Monongahela River, and growing up, my mother always said two things to me when I was going out to play: be home before the streetlights come on, and never go near the rivers. And she would always add, if you go in those rivers, you're going to melt. And we looked at the rivers in Pittsburgh as just something to get across. And we built lots of bridges to do that. But if you think about the rivers, there was very little public access. And Councilman Kraus in your district, Mayor Caligiuri, put the little park in there. And that was really the first overt recognition of the riverfront, that little park there. If you think of what the north side looked like when Three Rivers Stadium was there was a road along the river and sort of an afterthought of a little trail, asphalt broken apart along the river. And so not too long ago, the rivers were not seen as value. And we worked very hard to try to begin to get people to think about not turning their backs to the river, but making it the front door of Pittsburgh in terms of the design and how we cared about the rivers. And I would suggest look at the Alcoa building, one of the spectacular buildings. And Paul O'Neill was very focused on designing that building so that the front door was on the riverfront and the loading dock was on the road behind it. If you look at the Cultural Trust District, that was a surface parking lot. It'll do, it was a sort of it'll do attitude. We had parking along the river there, and the Cultural Trust design in a very difficult place, a public access that now connects to the area that you have under discussion. John Craig, when we were designing, who was the editor of the Post-Gazette, when we were designing the around the ballparks, urged us to push the road back off the river, and we thought, how are we going to afford to pay for that? And you see there today the Bettis's restaurant and the office buildings and the great lawn that we didn't develop, but we left open for the public access that created great public space that people used. And I'm telling you these stories because none of this has happened by accident. It's happened because we all had a choice to make, whether we were going to build world-class and embrace what is our best natural asset, or whether we were going to sort of have this it'll-do attitude. It's the best we can do. And I think you're sitting there today now facing this riverfront decision of whether you want to continue to build on this remarkable legacy of Pittsburgh. When I got elected mayor, Pittsburgh did not have a lot of people looking to invest in it. Councilman Kraus, we were looking at an old steel mill over in the south side, and I was just happy if somebody would think about investing in Pittsburgh. I didn't much care what it looked like or where it was, but I had a good planning director, Eloise Hirsch, and Tom Cox, and good friends in the architectural community and the foundation community that opened my eyes about the choices we have to make, about how we build on our legacy. And so we built the best baseball park in America. We didn't need to do that, okay? We didn't need to do that. We could have just built the convention center, but the foundations came together and challenged us in the mid-'90s. I didn't even know what green was, to build the largest certified green building in America, and we did that. And you celebrated the G20 in it. And so we made these decisions to do something different than what we had maybe done before and to celebrate the riverfront. And so I'm here today to encourage you to think about that, not in the terms of just this transaction, but in terms of that you're building a great city. I mean, I have, in my job that I've had for the last 6 years, I've been to over 100 cities in the world, Moscow being one of them, and meeting with mayors and dealing with development issues. And every city is engaged in how to take advantage of their waterfront. And Pittsburgh has a remarkable reputation as a city that's transformed itself. You've added to that. I have a lot of arrows in my back over Fifth and Forbes, but I have to say what you've done there is world-class. It's creating huge value for the city because you've paid attention to the details and the design. And let me just say, and I recognize the politics of this and how difficult it is to deal with a company like the Buncher Company that is really a long-term company invested in Pittsburgh and a good partner in Pittsburgh. If you've been on the South Side Works, Councilman Cross, you know that there's this UPMC operation, or the sports medicine facility in the Steelers headquarters. So imagine when the Steelers and Jeff Romoff of UPMC came to me and Dan Rooney and said, we want to build a Steelers headquarters and a world-class sports medicine facility and practice fields for the Steelers. What do you think I would say, right? I would say, that's great. And then the architect came back with a design, and the buildings were all on the river. There was no trail, and the road was done behind the buildings on the railroad track, and all those buildings, there was no riverfront. And we said, we really want you to be here, but we need you to move these things back off the river because there's going to be a trail there. It's going to go all the way to Washington, D.C. Who could have imagined, right? And so Dan Rooney and Jeff Romoff asked me to go to lunch at the Duquesne Club, and we went to lunch, and the waiter had to come over and ask us to keep quiet because we were yelling at each other so much. They were moving this out to Passavant Hospital if they couldn't get what they wanted. But if you go there today, there's a wonderful riverfront trail, and it created real value. And maybe a year after it was all built and a few months after it was opened and Dan was in his office on the corner, he called me up one nice summer evening and said, I see all these families riding bikes and walking along here. We did the right thing, didn't we? That's what you need to do now. You need to get this development to be world-class. You need to think about it as, how do you get people to invite people down to the river here? You're not inviting people to the river. You have gated streets in this development, and you have a public plaza that runs there, but with no retail or nothing that animates. I mean, public plazas are places where people go to hang out and to celebrate. They're going to go there if there are things going on and there's retail and stores you can buy and tables. And you need to think about how you design that. You need to think about how you invite people to that river and not discourage them by making it difficult to get there. And I look at that development, and there's a huge opportunity to do a TIF here. You're creating huge value. If you look at the South Side Works as a case in point, we finance 4 parking garages. Because if I look at that development, 50% of it's surface parking. That's not an urban development. Create value for the Buncher Company by giving them an opportunity to develop more there by doing structured parking. So I would really encourage you to think about how you move this development from an okay development to one that's world-class. And world-class means inviting people to enjoy the river, not putting surface parking lots on the river. Getting people to want to be there, to think about how do you create a great public space. I was in New York City on a conference last Friday, and the largest development now taking place in America, a development called Hudson Yards. The New York City City Council has required that development of $13 billion to have 60% of its property be public space. Public space, 60%. Barely is 10% of this property public space. And we're talking about a place that none of us had anything to do with. The Strip District is a remarkable place. It's our Pike's Place. It's where people want to be. So now invite them from the terminal building down to the riverfront. Invite them with activity and design in a way that celebrates who we are, that we're a world-class city. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Adele still has the floor.
I'll yield the floor to my colleague.
Mr. Gross.
I shouldn't have raised my hand so early.
So I think I might even be at a loss for words for probably the very first time being at this council table. What a pleasure to have you here.
Have that happen to you.
highly, I would add.
Teresa says you should come back more often.
No, what a
No, I
pleasure
care
to
deeply
have-
about the one.
And it shows. I mean, you have such passion and energy, and, people say that about a lot of us, too. I always love that passion where you have such passion. I always wonder what they mean by that. But it's clear you have a great passion for this, and the experience, expertise, and knowledge to back it up. I'm sure you've probably heard we have a bar or two on the south side. And my efforts over the last 4 or 5 years to sort of wrestle with that problem. And I'm hoping part of what my legacy might be for the time that I've had to serve here is what we're calling this Responsible Hospitality Initiative. And I bring that up to say that what we're focusing on here is Pittsburgh as a sociable city, and it directly connects with what you talk about in terms of creating these great public spaces. Those are the spaces that we all share. I like to call them our living room. I like to think of those as those places where we can all come together. No one claims unique and sole ownership. They're all our properties. And the work that we're doing with the Sociable City Initiative, and I would like very much to share recommendations with you and have some feedback
I'd love
from
to talk
you.
to. I'm happy to. I still live here on Perrysville Avenue. I care deeply about the city. I'm just not here a lot, because I'm
Yes.
working out of town.
But we'll have things finalized by next week,
Yeah,
and we'll actually be
call
doing
me.
a presentation.
Yeah,
And
I'll be happy
I'd
to.
love to share it with you. But I bring that up to bolster your argument about the importance of public space. Look at Market Square. And Fifth and Forbes in general, and you do have a lot of arrows in your back over Fifth and Ford, and that was a very hotly debated and contested.
But you've made the right decisions.
But look what's happening
You've created
there.
great right, and that's a public space.
I spend a lot of time there. I actually force my staff quite often to get out and be out, see what the city is about and what it has to offer. It's one thing to be in the office and the importance of answering the phone and dealing with constituents, but you had better be out and about as well and see what we're doing here, because there are great things that are happening here. I went down yesterday to Market Square just to have lunch to see the Global Village, because I hadn't seen it. And I'm thinking, how can I promote this? How can I say great things about it if I haven't even been there? So we went down, we had lunch, and we did a little shopping and that kind of stuff. But it is important. It's immensely important to continue this mindset of the importance of public space and the importance of having places to connect with people. You talk about the trails and people being out and about and biking and have picnics in the park and the great things that are happening in the park space down at Southside Works, and the trail now connects to Washington, D.C., and all of those great things. Those are the things, those are the amenities that bring people to live in cities. Those are the reasons that drive people to be here. Good housing market, I get it. Good job markets, I get it. Good schools, I get it. But if you're not at school, you're not at work, and you're not home, what do you want to do? You want to be out and about. Right. That's it. You want to interact with your friends and families and your guests and invitees. And that's the greatness of public space. Always mindful to protect history and protect and respect history. I get nervous when I hear about this development because of the impact it has on the Strip. I have amazing memories of childhood in the Strip and the importance of what that was, because that was sort of our market, as a kid. And I remember the trips at Christmas time especially to go down there and do shopping. My parents didn't have a lot of money. We went and bought wholesale, when we could. But this amazing history of the Strip. And, you talk about alienation of the Strip from a new development instead of envisioning and understanding, appreciating, and fighting for a connection of a new development into the Strip. They shouldn't be separate. They should be connected. They should be unified. One should complement the other. Councilman Dowd's done a great bit of work on this, and a great bit of work on this. And I support him in this, and I'm happy to entertain the amendments in that. But more than anything else, what he has done in this project is to bring you to the table.
Thank you. I can't speak to his amendments. I've not seen.
And I
his-
haven't seen them either.
I haven't seen his amendments, so I'm not speaking directly to that. I just, this is a good beginning, but it doesn't get to where I think Pittsburgh should be in terms of development.
No, but you bring a sense of well, connectedness and detachment at the same
Right,
time.
right,
You have a history with it, but you don't have a
Right.
horse in the race right now. You can share your institutional knowledge with us to help us make better decisions and understand through your past history how we can make good decisions here as well, too. And this has really been a delight to have you here at the table.
Thank you.
And to be able to sort of tap into your experience, which I've done in the past and which I hope to continue to do.
Thank you.
In the future.
Thank you.
But I probably have more to say, but I'm sure other members have comment they would like to make. So I'm going to relinquish for now, but I probably will come again in second round.
President Harris.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. No, I'm glad to be here. As I said, the riverfronts and how we treat them in Pittsburgh, I think, is one of the great opportunities of the city.
I think I remember the very first time we started on the riverfronts, and
On the
you
north
called
side.
the meeting together.
Zubik's Navy. Do you remember
Yes.
Zubik's Navy? You're
And,
too young, Councilman Burgess, to remember that. Zubik's Navy?
What was Zubik's name?
Zubik's Navy was a scrapyard on the north side that took up basically from about 9th Street up beyond the Heinz factory, and it was all a scrapyard. And we decided we wanted to build a riverfront trail there and realized that we owned the property. The city owned the property, and that Zubik had for all these years essentially squatted on it. And so we gave him a notice to move, and it was a big to-do at the time.
And I don't know if all of that is settled yet.
I don't know, but it was. I mean, every foot of the riverfront has a story to it. You have an opportunity to write this story of how you treat this part of the riverfront. Okay, and one is it's a wonderful opportunity that the Buncher Company has stepped forward, and now how you partner with them to create something really world class is, I think, your challenge.
And I think it has to be a partnership, just as, the issues come up about everyone wanting to build right on the riverfront.
Right.
Because then you would destroy the trails and all the beauty that we have there. Also, I know that you are an animal lover. I forget, would you have 4, 6
Lots of animals.
dogs alone? The dogs just knew they always followed Tom home, and he kept those animals. But we also have animals by the riverfront, and one of them is the least weasel. And if we tear apart where their home is, they're not going to be there anymore. Right. So we have to also protect that habitat in order, to keep that. Right. So many times we just knock buildings down or knock trees down, and we just don't realize why all the deer are where they're at. We still have salt sticks in our neighborhood for them. Right. And, the one little critter that is down there is the least weasel. And we do want to make sure that we do, protect them, because, once they're gone, they're gone. That's it. And so it's not just, for our families and making sure the public, but also that we have a place for the animals which were there before we
Well, what's
are.
interesting for me, and was when I was mayor, was that I saw the fact that fish and clams and animals were coming back to Pittsburgh that hadn't been here for 150 years because we have made successful decisions about the environment and cleaning the water, developing habitat, and so we began to see really not only a renaissance of Pittsburgh in the human aspect, but in terms of the environmental aspect, which is, I think, a real part of what is put Pittsburgh back on the map as a great place from a smoky steel town.
Yeah, and if we just have buildings and buildings, and we don't have that green, and we don't have the trails, and we don't have that public access there, then we're robbing the public, and really, we're robbing the developers, because really, they won't get the enrichment out of that project and the value out of that project. So I really thank you for being here today. I remember how the rivers were, that was your thing. Even before the trails were there, you were running.
Right.
So thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Mr. Peduto.
Thank you. Mayor, it's great to see you. And also during the holidays, please send my love to Molly, Shannon, TJ, and especially Mona. I think that you helped to illuminate the cause of uniqueness, that we do have a treasure, and that treasure can be enhanced by our time here in order to be something that we pass down to the others that becomes Pittsburgh. Nobody's against development on this table, and you know that. It's just how the development will...
the quality of it.
It's the quality of it, and how it will enhance the future development that will be coming, and also will build upon the standards that were created on the past developments. We're not asking anything different on this project than we ask on every project. We just had approval yesterday for Bakery Square 2. When we had stormwater and clean air standards for stormwater runoff, they exceeded it. When we asked for areas of openness so that it connects to Mellon Park and allows the neighborhood to be able to be a part, they created additional bike trails and walking trails so that East Liberty and Shady Side would have additional. With every one of the developments that we've done during your time and since that time along our rivers, we have met or exceeded every standard that has been put in place by River Life Task Force. Now, on this development, there are two asks. One is for a special zoning, a giving of this city to the developer on a zoning standard, and the second, following it, a giving of the people's money to help a private development. And what we're asking for are the standards to be met. That's all. There's really nothing more
My
that...
view is that that's the partnership that needs to happen. I go to lots of cities and meet with lots of mayors, and I say when I was mayor and we were doing a lot of development, a developer would come in and say, "Mayor, I have a great idea for you, or a great development for you." And I'd say, with all due respect, you tell me why it's a great development for you, and we'll decide whether it's a great development for us, because we have a value structure. And so when Dan Rooney and Jeff Romoff come and say, "We want to do a development on the riverfront, but there's no room for the trail," I say, no, our value is that the public's going to have a continuous access to the trail, or that we're going to develop a high-quality public space, or that we don't want a lot of surface parking. We want, we'll work with you, use public money to support structured parking. So there are the conversations I think you need to get to about what's the value, and you've demonstrated that value is important, and it's what has put Pittsburgh on the map, because we've made those right choices.
Now let me put the tough question to you, because you know the inevitable dance that occurs, that once that pushback comes back, that what we want to see for the public is this enhancement of our riverfront, this ability to make sure that the continuation of creating a uniqueness for Pittsburgh, an identity for Pittsburgh, happens on this most critical piece. This is the Strip District. This is the opportunity to connect it to the river. That the pushback will be, then we just won't do it. Then you know what? It's not worth it to us to even invest $1, and what you're left with are big surface parking lots.
And the question is, what is the ask too far, in effect, right? What is it? And you are going to generate a lot of public money from this in the form of a TIF if you want it. And how do you use that money to absorb some of that perceived risk that doesn't make the development happen? That's what I view. I don't think you should get your pockets picked, but on the other hand, I think you should rightly say, we'll be willing to invest. Structured parking would be an example. In the the development in the South Side Works, we recognized that that was going to be a very high expense for the developer there. So we absorbed that cost. Rather than trying to get the developer to do it, the development wouldn't happen. So I think that's the negotiation that has to take place, but I think your role is to protect the public value. And with the operations center, we were prepared to walk away from it. I'll be honest with you. Now, the good news is that there's a trail here. I mean, when we were having our discussions, there was not, for most people, there was not even the trail, you know. Somehow, lots of people think that those dangerous people that ride bicycles are going to break in and steal their computers, and they didn't want the trails behind them. So I'll give you PNC Bank, when they were building the operations center on Grant Street, right down the street here, they had their building directly up against the highway, and I called Tom O'Brien and I said, you need to move your building back because we're going to have a trail that connects from Point Park all the way out to Oakland through there. And you know, he said, that's going to cost us a lot of money, and it's going to cut our space down. And I said, can you do it? And so he did it, but when they redesigned the building, they put locker rooms in for their employees. They put their cafeteria and tables up along the trail right there because they saw them begin to see the value of it. And that's what you need to do. You need to sort of be the advocates for that value.
Well, thank you.
Thank
for
you all
sharing
very
as
much. I don't want to take up any more time. Good luck to you.
Mr.
Okay.
We are,
Quick question. I'm going to slightly disagree with Councilman Peduto in that we're not necessarily asking them to meet standards because standards is what's in the code. And what we're actually asking them to do is go above and beyond that. And that's where that negotiation that you're referring to comes into. They are meeting standards. What we're talking about is a public perceived standard that it goes beyond what's already in code. Right. You mentioned the 10% public space. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm not sure if you do either, but if you don't, I'll find out. Would you happen to know what percentage of both Southside Works and the North Shore is dedicated public space?
I don't.
Okay.
When you say the North Shore, you mean Washington's Landing or the Riverfront?
The Riverfront.
I don't know
Okay.
the percentage
I'll
of
find out.
public space that's there.
That was it. Thank you.
all right. Anyone else for first round? If there's no one for first round, second round starts with Mr. Dowd.
Before we let you go, I think one of the things that, well, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. A lot of people have talked about your commitment to the rivers and to that redevelopment along the riverfront and the vision. You know, there's no doubt you turned us as a city towards the river when we couldn't see what was there, and so that's important. And I don't want to belabor that point, but it's critical to emphasize that was partly how we ended up starting this conversation. I also think what you just mentioned about a value structure is critical. I mean, having, you know, one of the things I remember is that was one of the trademarks of your administration. You had value structures. You ended up in a lot of battles that you mentioned, arrows in your back. That's partly how you ended up with some of them, not just in your back, all around, because of sticking to the value structures and sticking to the value structures on behalf of the public. I think that's also absolutely critical. But you also now are out, as you mentioned, across the country and across the globe. And I wonder if you could just help us understand, because I'm not, and many of us don't get the chance to travel. Tell us a little bit about, or help enlighten us a little bit about what's happening around the globe as far as waterfront, riverfront, oceanfront, lakefront development and urban centers, and the value that it's adding, not just, you know, for particular developments, but for whole communities and the identity of a city.
Well, I mean, Pittsburgh is, when I get invited a lot to speak, in part because of what happened to Pittsburgh, because we now are not known as much as a smoky steel town, as this remarkable transformation, and you should know that. And so I get invited. I was in Moscow just a year ago with a small group of 8 people, invited by the city of Moscow to look at how they do redevelopment on their old industrial sites and create a new city. And ironically, at a dinner the night we got there, hosted by the mayor and the deputy mayor of Moscow, when I stood up to introduce myself, the deputy mayor said, "My favorite city in America." the Pittsburgh Penguins. And you forget that. And ironically, I come back to my room, 9-hour time difference, turn on the television, and the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals are playing live in Moscow. It shows you the power of sports in terms of communicating. But every city I go to is struggling to define themselves as Pittsburgh has had to do, moving from what we were to something else. Some of it was luck, and some of it was a very intentional series of decisions we made in terms of our employment base and how we embrace the universities. Virtually every city's trying to do that. So there's two drivers. One is sort of creating the kind of jobs that appeal to the best and the brightest, and the other creating a place that appeals to the best and the brightest, a city that is vibrant and exciting. And cities in very many different kinds of ways are trying to do that. So in Oklahoma City, which has got on the map, Oklahoma City had no waterfront in its downtown. They built an artificial canal. Okay, literally where there was never a canal, they built the canal. It is lined with restaurants, and they built a small minor league ballpark at one end of the canal to create a waterfront experience. So you have in Chicago in the last 10 years, almost 60,000 people have moved into downtown Chicago. In part because of the spectacular parks, okay? So every city is trying to figure out those two. And the cities that will succeed, I think, for a lot of reasons, but one of them will be they'll be clear about what their competitive advantages are and build on those. And our biggest natural competitive advantage are our riverfronts. And so the quality of the development we do along those really communicates that we're this great city, okay? And we've been able to do that, and you have an opportunity to continue that legacy. And that's the challenge I think you face. And so I could rattle, San Antonio, you've heard of the San Antonio Riverwalk. It's world famous, right? It's as big as Pine Creek. That's the size of the San Antonio River going through.
They have a different definition.
Going through San Antonio, but they've taken huge advantage, and they've had a consistent high quality development of that waterfront. So I mean, I could go through every city, and big rivers, small rivers, artificial water. People have created great value from that.
I just want to again thank you for being here
Sure,
and for
thank
entering
you.
the conversation.
Good luck to all of you with your
Thank you.
decisions. Okay. I'll see you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.